Now, this lecture is a sample lecture of what is called the economic principle of traditional Chinese philosophy. As I said yesterday in the seminar, this is the result of a long discussion with the late Venerable Master Qin Kong a few years ago in Lampeter, where we talked about the importance of fusing the teaching of traditional philosophy in modern economic teaching. Because the modern economic teaching is problematic. It doesn't take into account of ethics and social harmony, but simply numbers, and that is obviously what is driving this world so mad these days. So then I went on to do all the research and creation of the courses. And hopefully this is a long-term mission, not a one-time deal. And hopefully I can do a good job in improving the modern economic education. Now, today's lecture is a sample lecture, so we'll discuss the relation between society and economics. Like I said, is one of a longer course, right? This is just an example. So we'll look at the theoretical arguments of three famous philosophers of ancient China and try to convince you that the purpose of economic management is all about human. Okay. Xunzi, Ban Gu, and Liu Zongyuan. Okay. So the study of the relation between sociology, if you like, and economics starts with the question of what is the origin of society, right? Where does it come from? In other words, before we consider the function of wealth in supporting the society, why do people come to live together in the first place? That is the fundamental question. Now, to understand this issue, we must refer to the theory of three philosophers, namely Xunzi, Ban Gu, and Liu Zongyuan. So Xunzi is, what he was, a Chinese Confucian philosopher during the Warring State period, which was from 475 BC to 221 BC. And in the book of Xunzi, the chapter of royal regulation, well, there are many versions of the translation of the title, Xunzi gave a logical deduction of the birth of society, and he focused on the material side of human survival. So what did he say? Well, Xunzi started his deduction with a comparison between a human being and a beast. So he said, on an individual level, the beast is much stronger and more fit to survive than human being, right? For example, human beings are, excuse me. My apologies. So, for example, human beings are not as strong as a bull, right? As bulls, and a human surely cannot run away from danger as fast as horses, for sure. And as a matter of fact, any large animal can knock us over, right, and kill us quite easily. But the question is, why bulls and horses are subject to man? Why is this? Well, that's because men are not on their own, right? Men are social. But how is a man able to be social? Well, it's because of the principle of individual difference. And this is actually quite right. In society, people are connected by various relations, right? For example, in a company, I mean, some of our audiences have worked in a company before. There are executive directors. Executive directors have also subordinating departmental heads who look after regional managers within the departments and other employees. But in a society, there are police who maintain social security, right? Engineers who look after infrastructures, farmers who provide nourishment. So everyone contributes with their specialized skills and ranks are also designed to assist their work. And this is not against the notion of equality, no, but simply a division of labor. So I think such individual difference is maintained by the justice and rules law. Okay, so with, as you can see from the slide here, with justice and rules in place and the recognition of individual difference, society can function in harmony. So when the society can function in harmony, people come together and form great strength. So in this way, human beings can not only tame large animals, but that used to be a threat to life, right? But also conquer the nature as well. So Xunzi uses the example of secured houses to illustrate his point. Okay, so according to him, human beings form society in order to survive, and a proper legal system that protects right and justice is fundamental to the survival of mankind. And the legal system, the legal rights are based on ethical justice. Okay. Now, what happens if the society cannot distribute the individual rights justly? Well, for a start, men will quarrel, right? They will fight. So let's think about a company, right? Think about a company with no clear division of responsibility and authority. It simply won't work. It won't work. And society without individual rights and rules will become chaotic. And even within a family, justice and respect are needed to maintain a harmony. So without these, the unity of society can fall apart. And when people stop working together, they become weak. And when they become weak, the survival becomes difficult. So that's the idea of Xunzi. So according to him, people form a society in order to survive. And from a material perspective, survival depends on the satisfaction of economic need. But the functioning of society depends on the realization of justice. Okay. So let me repeat this. Survival depends on the satisfaction of economic need. Yes, but the functioning of society depends on the realization of justice. So that's the view of Xunzi. This is how he argued about the creation of society. Okay. Now, very similar to survival reason, Ban Gu, who was a historian in the early Han Dynasty, illustrated that the formation of society is for economic reason, and he discussed this in his book, the Book of Han. So in his writing, Ban Gu explains that human beings have to enslave natural things, or the nature, in order to provide for his nourishment, in order to live, right? Now, because humans don't have the same physical strength as animals, they have to rely on intellectual power, don't they? So Ban Gu pointed out that men are different from animal in that men practice the 5 moral constants, which are benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trust. So these factors, but the factor that they unite people together and form society is in fact love, according to Ban Gu. So, well, what's the problem? Well, if men don't love each other, they cannot be social. If they cannot be social, they cannot conquer natural things, as Ban Gu put it, and their nourishment will not be sufficient. So what happens if nourishment is not sufficient? You see, it's very logical. It's very interesting. What happens if nourishment is not sufficient? Well, as you can imagine, people will start compete for it, right? They will start competing for it. And in doing so, what is called a warring spirit arises. People will fight. And this is the beginning of a war, right? And interestingly, in modern society, economic war is a legitimate thing to do, right? And although this kind of economic war is one without bloodshed, many people did commit a suicide during the 1997 Asian financial crisis and 2007 financial crisis. I mean, we can't go into much detail here because of time constraint, but we have to be very careful, extremely careful with this idea of economic war, right? We can't. I don't think we should call it a war without bloodshed, because people did die. So what happened, according to Banggu, what happens after the war breaks out? Well, people have to, search for a leader with excellent virtues of respect, deference, and universal love. And when this person is found, people will follow him and form a peaceful society. So according to Banggu, human beings form society in order to increase the supply of nourishment in order to live. And love is fundamental to the unity of people and the efficiency of subsistence. Okay. So, to his view, economic need and survival are essentially the same thing, and both Banggu and Xunzi illustrate the importance of economic life in driving the establishment of society, but from different for different reasons. Okay. Now, the last reference that we will examine in this short session is a political discussion paper by the very well known politician and writer of the Tang Dynasty, Liu Zongyuan, during the late 8th century. Okay, so now this is a summarized version of his argument. Now, in his paper, Essay on Feudalism, Liu Zongyuan points out that the creation of society is also driven by economic need, but also different forms of society are based on what is needed at the time. Now, in a feudal empire, as you know, of course, the society is structured around the relationships derived from the holding of land in exchange for service and labor, right? And usually there is one emperor who owns all the land of the country. He would grant territories to leading princes or kings in exchange for their services. So this is the structure of a feudal empire. And the leading princes can also do the same in a pecking order, okay? But in order to understand the origin of society, let's start from the bottom of the society and work our way up. Okay. So first of all, let's imagine. Well, because for economists, we tend to begin with a very simple assumption. So first of all, let's say there is a struggle for nourishment and the material supply on the individual level. So it's not sufficient to live, basically. So very similar to Xunzi's argument, man must borrow material from the outside to satisfy need because of incompetent physical strength. Okay. Now, given limited material supply, the action of man taking resources from the nature will lead to competition and war. And also similar to the point of Banggu, if war is ceaseless, people must go to somebody with wisdom and virtue. And this person can decide the dispute and tell people what is right and what is wrong. And then the punishment will be used to make the ruling solid and credible. So in this way, there is a ruler, and the legal and political system arises. Okay. And eventually a local society is formed by people from the neighborhood. There's a very small society is formed, right, by people from the neighborhood living close to each other. And we can call this a town or even a city. Okay. And the leader, the town master, if you like. However, the so-called war for resources doesn't end here. The reason is that peace may have been achieved on a town level, but the competition still exists between different towns, right? Between different towns. And because there are more people to fight, because the resources are limited, the war is only becoming greater and more devastating. Right? Obviously, the war between two towns is more devastating than a war between two persons. Now, in order to end the war between different towns, again, a leader with even greater virtue is needed to decide the dispute, allocate resource justly, and maintain peace. So we have what is called the class of the feudal lord. Now you can start to see that we're falling into a terrible cycle here. And what's that cycle? Well, with greater power and greater territory, the war is even greater. The feudal lords will fight for resources, and here comes the leading princes or kings who govern multiple states. Okay, and the war continues to take place, of course, and will not stop until there is one man with the greatest virtue of all, and everybody comes to him and obeys his governance and ruling in order to keep all the people peaceful. And this person, we call him the emperor or the sovereign in general, or the son of heaven. So only when the whole world is united, the war stops. So the virtue of the emperor causes the unity of the feudal states. And that's the idea. Now, during the early Western Zhou dynasty, all the feudal lords looked up to the Zhou kings, right? The house of Zhou, and followed their virtue. But as history continued, their virtue diminished. The history entered the warring state period, where nobody cared about the emperor anymore. So feudalism is not the idea of the sages. I mean, we ask the question: why did feudalism exist in the first place? What is not an idea of the sages or a sort of a man-made social structure? Is only a necessity of the condition at the time. It was needed. But the point is that economic struggle still is the underlying driving force of the formation of the different societies. It's still the driving force. So far, we have seen three different theories of the formation of society. Okay, society based on legal rights, society based on love and ethical power, and also historical reason. But whatever the reason is, we can see that society is always an organization that carries on the struggle for the existence in collective form, isn't it? So the implication of all of these three theories in solving the conflict of the world today is, to my view, world economy. In other words, the world needs to move towards economic unity in order to solve problems of world sociology. Okay, of course, there are other things needed as well, but economic unity is crucial to achieving this goal. According to Liu Zongyuan, we can see that the war continues, right, among the different sizes of the society, and it ceases only in the unification of the whole world. Now, we must emphasize again that economic conflict facing the people in Confucius' time was an international issue. It was an international issue. It was not a domestic issue. Because as you know, the different states during the Western Zhou dynasty, or Eastern Zhou dynasty as well, right? During the Zhou dynasty, there were independent states with independent political agenda and military expedition. So it's an international issue, very similar to what we're facing today. So the teachings by Confucian scholars are driven by world peace, not just domestic peace, but world peace. So we must keep this in mind, I think, at all times in order to make our study and research relevant to solving today's world problem. So that's the end of my short sample lecture. Thank you for your time, and I welcome any question. Thank you.